So anyhow, moving on to our next story. This one comes from the register.com, and this is a little different than normal, but I thought it was worth talking about. The title here is Raw Deal. Corporate Spy Admits Role in Espionage at HR Software Biz Rippling.
This
So
this crazy story.
this is crazy. This is really crazy. Uh, so there's two companies, and I want to make sure that I call it out because it's a little confusing. Uh, one company is named Rippling, and the other company is named Deal, Deel. They're both HR software company. So just that is the context. There's this guy named Keith O'Brien who is in Dublin, Ireland, who worked in the payroll compliance group at Rippling. Apparently, he was on the market for a new job, and the CEO of this competitive company named Deal reached out to Keith and offered him a deal that apparently Keith couldn't refuse. So rather than a normal job, the CEO of Deal offered Keith to be, quote, James Bond and continue to work at Rippling, get paid by Deal as well, in return for spying on his employer Rippling and then feeding back whatever information the CEO wanted out of Rippling. So the plot was concocted by allegedly the CEO of Deal, and this guy Keith O'Brien, agreed to go along with the plan. And so apparently for some period of time, Deal would make requests of Keith O'Brien on what information they would like to see, internal information about Rippling, and that would get communicated back through Telegram because they wanted to have a secret communications channel. And I guess they had, kind of like the U.S. Department of Defense, they set their messages to expire so that they couldn't be held
Perfectly safe.
accountable.
Perfectly safe.
Perfectly safe, exactly. What could possibly go wrong? So apparently, at some point,
Wait,
Rippling became. Oh, go ahead.
how much is it worth to be a spy for industrial espionage at a competitive company?
So the it's a king's salary of 5,000 euros per month.
That is a
Yes,
surprisingly low amount to me, honestly. I mean, we can chat about this
very
a bit
low.
more later, but I'm guessing Mr. O'Brien might have been a bit disgruntled for him to take such a relatively low amount for such a big risk.
Yeah, it's he's probably not in a high paying job anyway, and so I mean, it could have been, it could have doubled his salary. I don't
Global
know.
payroll compliance manager is pretty healthy.
Hard to say.
Yeah, hard to say, but okay. Anyway, back to your narrative.
Hard to say. Ireland doesn't demand the highest wages. Anyway, Rippling became suspicious that somehow Deal, and it's by the way, it's not clear what caused them to become suspicious, but they became suspicious that they had a mole who was feeding information back to Deal. And so the team at Rippling had a clever idea, and in hindsight now, it's actually pretty brilliant. They sent an email, or sent a letter to Rippling, sent a letter to the leadership team at Deal, and said that they found evidence that Deal is conducting espionage operations in this one particular Slack channel of Rippling's Slack account. And they listed the Slack channel, and they knew what was going to happen. What they had counted on, and what actually did happen, is that the Deal team went back to Keith O'Brien and said, Keith O'Brien, what is going on in this Slack channel that was referenced in this letter? Can you go and take a look? Well, the Slack channel was a canary. It was intended to out the mole, because the only person apparently in the Slack channel was like the chief revenue officer of Rippling. And so as Keith O'Brien is searching for this Slack channel, which was, I guess, set to private, and you could find it if you searched for it. He did that kind of simultaneous to getting a message back from Deal saying, "No, don't, stop. We think it's actually a trap, and so just stop." So Keith replied back, "No, I've already done it." And that got a reply of, "Oh shit," from the Deal CEO. And so then it kind of goes like, that's crazy up to this point. But now the crazy goes in overdrive. So obviously, Rippling at this point knew that Keith O'Brien was the mole, and so he was visiting an office to pick up some paperwork and was greeted in the lobby by a lawyer, a public lawyer. I think it was basically what we would in the U.S. call a prosecutor. And the prosecutor said that they wanted to search uh, Keith O'Brien's devices, his phone and his laptop and whatnot. So Keith disagreed, and he ran into the bathroom and did a factory reset on his phone.
Who hasn't done that? Come on.
I mean, yeah, really, who hasn't done that? So after he left the bathroom, he told the lawyer, I'm leaving, and the lawyer warned him that this was could have legal implications for him, and he said, "Well, I'll take that chance." So Keith then started getting guidance from Deal's legal team. Now, this is where it starts to get really wild, because Deal's legal team, Deal's lawyers, were actually apparently counseling Keith on what to do. And they told him to smash his phone and throw it in a pond. And in fact, what he did
Okay.
was
To be clear, Keith is spying on Deal for Rippling, but he's an employee of Deal. So therefore, Deal's in-house lawyers are trying to do some damage control to maybe
Mhm.
minimize this to get out. So they're now trying to work with their own corporate spy that they have caught to minimize the evidence.
So no, no, no,
Okay.
no. So Rippling is the victim company.
Okay.
Deal is the offending company.
Got it. Okay.
So Rippling has caught Keith in the act and
Yes.
went to the police.
Got it.
The prosecutor visited him, and now Deal, the company who was soliciting Keith to perform
Who's
the
paying him to
es-
be a spy?
yep,
Yeah.
their legal team is now advising Keith on how to act. And it is really hard to believe that lawyers who, I don't know that they were US lawyers. I think Rippling is a US company, and I think Deal may not be a US company. Anyway, the lawyers are duty bound to act ethically. And so this is, I think, going to splash, assuming that the facts are as they're represented here, it's going to splash back on them. But anyway, the lawyers uh, first told them to smash his phone and throw it in the pond. He apparently smashed it with an axe and put it down the drain. That doesn't seem like the best idea to me. But hey, that's what he did. And then they told him that if he continued to deal, told Keith that if he continued to cooperate, they would pay to relocate him to Dubai, which I guess doesn't have an extradition treaty, I suppose, and cover whatever legal fees he's accumulated. So their next request is for him to open up a police report accusing Rippling of violating the um, the embargo on Russia. Where he was to claim that Rippling was facilitating illegal payments to Russia in contradiction to the laws about restricting activity with Russia.
And was Rippling doing anything that would violate
No,
Russian sanctions?
no, they were not, in fact. But he did, in
Okay.
fact, open up a police report. And it's
Why? What value does that bring?
so I think the intention there was to deflect away from the espionage case, so that if they were able to get Rippling closed down because they had allegedly been doing something with Russia, then they might not have to deal with the fallout of them soliciting
So,
corporate espionage.
so these lawyers watched a few too many episodes of Better Call Saul, is what I'm hearing.
They did something, man.
Okay, so then what happens?
So at some point along the way, I as you read this, apparently as Keith was en route to a court proceeding, the person that he was in the car with convinced him to come clean, and so he struck a deal with the prosecutor that if he signed a sworn affidavit, kind of admitting to what had happened, they would not press charge, or the company would not press charges on him. Now, I don't know. I'm not an expert in Irish law, so I don't know if like there's still a possibility that the state could raise charges even if the company doesn't want to. Anyway, Heath admitted to everything that's been going on, and so now Rippling has lawsuits against Deal in federal lawsuits against Deal in the U.S. And apparently, Heath, I guess, is just gonna walk away from this, which I find that absolutely amazing.
This whole thing is crazy.
Absolutely amazing.
So I don't know how you would really defend against this very easily, aside from I would love to know what gave Rippling the suspicion that they had a mole. That's really where I would drill in for the context of this show. Of insider threat is a real thing, but in a situation like this, man, it's tough to know. Like, I guess if your competitor just happens to get a lot of smart information that is stupidly revealing to you that they know every move. For what little I understand about like military intelligence and espionage, like you don't want to reveal everything you know because then they know that they've got a leak. So it seems like Deal might have been a little too aggressive with the information that they were getting from Keith out of Rippling, and then that tipped Rippling off of why does Deal know all this about our secret information is my guess.
Yeah, my guess, and this is pure speculation, so don't take it anything more than that, is that it was based on customer information. So Deal was probably soliciting information about who Rippling's customers were and what the deals, how the deals were structured and what services they provided and whatnot, so that Deal could come in and probably undercut or somehow try to steal business away from Rippling. And my guess is that one of Rippling's customers, this is just again pure hypothesis. One of Rippling's customers probably came forward and maybe had a more close personal relationship with somebody at Rippling and said, "Hey, it's kind of odd that Deal had this level of information about us," and that probably started a sequence of them asking more and more questions that led them to realize that they had a mole. So
Yeah, makes sense.
as you said, like this is not something that's easy to defend against. Like this isn't really a business process where you can implement like a four eyes, two-person rule. At some point, you have to trust your employees.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is don't give people access to company confidential data they don't need access to. Like, if this guy was, I'm just making up information here, like getting into the CRM and getting all the deal info, did he need that for his job? That's about the only, compartmentalize as best you can. I get it. It's a hassle. I get it. That's a pain, but things like this
I
happen.
thought, I just thought the way they went about finding the mole was pretty clever.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Kudos to them.